What if I told you that a guy with zero professional cooking experience and a backyard smoker he'd been tinkering with for years opened a single trailer in a gravel lot in 2009, sold out of brisket every single day from the start, and within 6 years had become the first pitmaster in American history to win a James Beard Award for Best Chef? That Austin and San Antonio, two Texas cities 80 miles apart, have fought a documented multi-year, occasionally diplomatic breakfast taco war, so intense that one city's mayor traveled to the other with a literal peace treaty, while a competing newspaper editor spent actual archival research time trying to prove the rival city stole credit for a meal that traces back across the border to Mexico. Austin, where a backyard hobby becomes a national institution and a breakfast item becomes a diplomatic incident. In 2009, Aaron Franklin and his wife Stacy opened a barbecue trailer on the side of an Austin interstate. Aaron had no professional culinary training. What he had was a backyard hobby, smoking briskets on a cheap offset smoker, tweaking his technique brisket after brisket, saving up for better equipment, and a feeling somewhere in the middle of watching a fire one evening that this was actually what he wanted to do with his life. The trailer sold out of brisket every single day from nearly the beginning. Texas Monthly barbecue editor Daniel Vaughn first visited in January 2010, eating off a picnic table in an empty gravel lot because there was nowhere else to sit. By September of that year, Vaughn showed up 15 minutes before opening and was annoyed to find a line already forming. Franklin Barbecue became the first restaurant Vaughn ever awarded a 6th star on his own rating scale, a category he'd created specifically to describe a place worth a honeymoon trip. Franklin moved into a permanent brick-and-mortar building in 2011, painted to match the colors of the original trailer. Bon Appetit's editor called it the best barbecue in the country that same year. President Barack Obama visited in July 2014, and in a moment that instantly became part of Austin food folklore, personally paid for the lunches of everyone standing in line behind him. In May 2015, Aaron Franklin became the first pitmaster in James Beard Foundation history to win Best Chef in any category, a recognition that, until that point, barbecue had simply never been considered chef food by the foundation's own standards. The brisket itself is built on post oak wood and Meyer Angus beef, seasoned with nothing more than salt and pepper, smoked low and slow until the bark sets and the fat renders completely. A 2017 fire damaged the smokehouse section badly enough to close the restaurant for 3 months. It reopened smaller, rebuilt the pit by spring 2018, and never lost the line. People still arrive before dawn and wait hours for a plate. In February 2016, a New York-based writer published an article on Eater Austin claiming that Austin was the birthplace of the breakfast taco, or at least the phrase itself. The reaction from 80 miles down Interstate 35 was immediate, organized, and almost entirely unforgiving. A Change.org petition appeared calling for the writer's exile from the state of Texas, accusing Austin of taco negligence, and demanding the city establish an annual San Antonio Day as penance. It collected over 1,600 signatures. San Antonio chef Johnny Hernandez, owner of the popular restaurant La Gloria, formally challenged Austin to a public taco throwdown, writing, "Austin, you have gone too far this time. We, as a city, feel the time has come to settle this feud once and for all." The historical record, once researchers actually dug into newspaper archives, settled the question fairly clearly, and not in Austin's favor. The earliest documented print reference to breakfast tacos appears in the July 23, 1975 food section of the Arizona Republic, describing a culinary tour of San Antonio. A 1976 El Paso Herald-Post advertorial and a San Antonio Express recipe both predate any Austin newspaper mention by roughly a decade. Texas Monthly itself didn't write about Austin's breakfast taco obsession until April 1986, by which point, according to taco historians, the dish had already been a staple for years across the Rio Grande Valley, where Tejano and Mexican immigrant families had long been wrapping eggs and meat into tortillas as a portable, inexpensive breakfast born from the genuine economic necessity of feeding a household quickly before work. On March 10, 2016, the conflict reached a formal diplomatic resolution. San Antonio Mayor Ivy Taylor traveled to Austin to meet with Austin Mayor Steve Adler, and the two signed what they called the I-35 Accords, officially declaring both cities' tacos delicious and proclaiming March 10th as an annual breakfast taco day. Taylor brought tacos from her favorite San Antonio spot. Adler brought tacos from Austin's Juan in a million. The timing wasn't entirely ceremonial. President Obama was scheduled to visit Austin again that same week, and neither mayor particularly wanted him walking into an active taco war. In 1978, a 25-year-old college dropout named John Mackey borrowed $10,000 from family and friends to open a small natural food store in Austin called Saferway, a pun on Safeway, the grocery chain, with his girlfriend, Renee Lawson. They lived in the store's basement because they'd been evicted from their apartment for storing food products there. In 1980, Mackey partnered with another local natural food store, Clarksville Natural Grocery, merging the two businesses into a single 12,500 square foot store with a staff of 19 people. They called it Whole Foods Market, and at the time, it was one of the largest natural food supermarkets in the entire country. A genuinely new category, since most health food stores of that era were tiny operations selling supplements and bulk grains, not a full-scale grocery experience. Less than a year after opening in Memorial Day weekend 1981, the Colorado River flooded catastrophically. Whole Foods' single store sat directly in the flood path, and the water destroyed almost the entire inventory: shelves, refrigeration, products, everything. The company had no flood insurance. By any reasonable business logic, that should have been the end of it. Instead, customers, neighbors, and even local competitors showed up to help the small staff clean out the mud and rebuild. Investors and vendors extended credit. The store reopened within weeks. Whole Foods Market expanded from that single flood-damaged Austin location into the company that effectively built the entire American market category, now known as natural and organic grocery, eventually growing into a national, then international chain, before Amazon acquired it in 2017 for $13.7 billion. Migas is the breakfast dish that distinguishes itself from a basic egg taco by one specific, non-negotiable ingredient: stale, day-old corn tortillas cut into strips or torn into pieces, fried until crisp, then scrambled directly into the eggs along with onion, tomato, jalapeno, and a generous handful of shredded cheese. The word migas translates roughly to crumbs, and the dish's entire logic is built around using up tortillas that have gone too stale to roll, a classic no-waste solution that Tex-Mex kitchens across South and Central Texas adapted from similar Mexican migas traditions found in dishes like chilaquiles. The fried tortilla strips don't go fully soft when scrambled in. They retain a slight chew and crunch that gives the dish its specific texture, something a basic scrambled egg taco never has. Austin's breakfast taco shops serve migas both loose, scooped directly onto a plate with refried beans and a tortilla on the side, and rolled into the taco itself. It occupies a permanent fixture position on nearly every Tex-Mex breakfast menu in the city, frequently positioned as the default Austin breakfast order for anyone who can't decide between half a dozen other taco fillings. Walk into virtually any Tex-Mex restaurant in Austin, and a bowl of queso will appear on the table before you've finished reading the menu, to the point that ordering it almost feels redundant, since the assumption is that you obviously want it. Texas queso is built from melted cheese, traditionally Velveeta or another smooth, easily melted processed cheese base, increasingly augmented in Austin's more upscale spots with real cheddar and Monterey Jack, combined with diced tomatoes, green chilies, and jalapenos, served warm in a bowl alongside a basket of tortilla chips. The Velveeta-based version, while sometimes dismissed by purists as inauthentic, melts into a smoother, more stable consistency than natural cheese alone typically achieves, which is precisely the texture most Texans grew up expecting. Austin's queso culture runs deep enough to have its own annual competitive event: Austin's Tacos and Tequila and queso-focused food festivals, and a running, good-natured civic debate about whether the city's more elevated, real cheese queso interpretations represent an improvement on or a betrayal of the classic Velveeta version that built the tradition in the first place. Czech immigrants began settling in significant numbers across central Texas, including the towns and farmlands surrounding Austin, beginning in the mid-1800s, bringing with them a sweet, yeasted pastry tradition that has remained remarkably intact more than 150 years later. A traditional kolache is a round, slightly sweet roll with a shallow depression in the center, filled with fruit preserves, sweetened poppy seed paste, or sweetened farmer's cheese, baked until golden. Central Texas. Czech communities in towns like West and Caldwell maintain dedicated kolache bakeries that have operated continuously for generations. And Austin sits close enough to that Czech settlement belt that kolaches appear regularly on the city's bakery counters and at Czech heritage festivals throughout the region. Texas took the concept one significant step further than the traditional Czech version. The kolache sold at gas stations and bakeries across the state. Today is frequently a savory variation. Dough wrapped entirely around a sausage link, sometimes with cheese or jalapeno added. A Tex-Czech hybrid that purists distinguish by calling it a klobasnek rather than a true kolache, even as nearly everyone in casual conversation just calls the whole category kolaches. While Franklin barbecue built its reputation inside Austin's city limits, the broader Texas Hill Country barbecue tradition that surrounds the city, running through towns like Lockhart, Luling, and Driftwood, predates Franklin by generations and continues to draw Austin residents on dedicated weekend pilgrimages. This older Central Texas tradition, built by German and Czech immigrant butcher shops in the late 1800s and early 1900s, centers on meat markets that originally sold barbecue simply as a way to use cuts that hadn't sold fresh by the end of the day. Smoked over post oak, served on butcher paper with no sauce at all, because the meat markets selling it were butchers first, pitmasters second, and saw sauce as an unnecessary distraction from quality meat. The Salt Lick, located in Driftwood just outside Austin, became one of the most visited barbecue destinations specifically tied to the greater Austin area, operating its own famous open smoke pits since 1967, and drawing lines of visitors driving out from the city specifically for the experience of eating barbecue, surrounded by the actual hill country landscape that built the tradition in the first place. Texas chili rests on one rule that Austin defends as fiercely as anywhere else in the state: no beans. A proper bowl of Texas chili, sometimes called bowl of red, is built entirely from cubed or coarsely ground beef, dried chili peppers, cumin, garlic, and a thickening agent that comes from the meat and chilies themselves rather than from any bean filler. The bean-free tradition traces to 19th century Texas chuck wagon cooking, where trail cooks fed cattle drovers using available beef, dried chilies, and whatever spices were on hand. A practical, beanless formula that became formalized as the official Texas style, and which Texas state legislators have, only half-jokingly, defended on the record over the decades. Austin chili cook-offs and competitions held throughout the year maintain the no-bean standard as a point of genuine regional pride, treating any bean-laden version as something closer to a different dish entirely than to chili proper. In 1984, Amy Lee Simmons opened a small ice cream shop on Austin's Guadalupe Street, near the University of Texas campus, with a specific philosophy: ice cream scooping should be theater. Amy's became known for its scoopers, employees encouraged to perform tricks with the ice cream scoops, flip mix-in ingredients in the air, and generally treat the counter experience as a small show rather than a transaction. The shop's crush-ins, candy, cookies, and other mix-ins folded directly into the ice cream on a frozen marble slab in front of the customer, became a signature format that distinguished Amy's from a standard scoop shop. Amy's expanded to multiple locations across Austin and remains entirely independent and locally owned more than 4 decades after that first Guadalupe Street location, treated by generations of University of Texas students and Austin residents alike as a defining late-night and post-South by Southwest show stop. Underneath every breakfast taco, every bowl of queso, and every plate of migas in Austin sits a foundation that predates the city's tech boom, its music festivals, and its barbecue trailers by well over a century. Tex-Mex cuisine itself, rooted in the Tejano people, Texans of Mexican descent whose families lived in this territory before Texas was Texas, going back to Spanish colonial settlement. Tex-Mex developed as its own distinct culinary tradition, heavily influenced by Mexican cooking but shaped by American ingredients and railroad-era trade access that arrived after the Civil War. Distinct enough from regional Mexican cuisine that food historians treat it as its own category entirely, not simply a diluted or Americanized version of Mexican food. Austin's entire Tex-Mex restaurant scene, from old-school institutions to the city's newer hipster-leaning taco shops, sits on that Tejano foundation whether the menu acknowledges it directly or not.